So, for example, even for today's protest, not only
Hey, Lois.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
It looked very nice yesterday. Did you have a nice time or a
Yeah,
meaningful time? Or
I would say it's a lot. It was a lot. It was, yeah, I'm still absorbing it. It's, I'm not sure what it was, but I don't know what category you put something like that, but it was a lot. It ends up that we hadn't actually organized it as a group, but there were like 8 or 9 of us from Northbrook. There are actually a few more from Northbrook, but 8 or 9 of us that sort of went together. And so it ends up I went on the Federation. The Federation had chartered some planes. And even that was like a whole thing because I think I registered like on Thursday, and there were a bunch of changes that kept on happening with how it was all going to work out. And it wasn't until like Monday night that we found out that our plane is actually taking off from O'Hare. There were 3 planes. 2 of them took off from Midway. 1 took off from O'Hare. Our plane ended up taking off from O'Hare. And the whole thing, like the plane is everybody's going to this event, and nobody really knew what it was going to be like. And so it started like that, and then when you were there, it wasn't like it was clear what you're supposed to do. You're just sort of hanging out, trying to find people and say hello to people while the stuff on stage is going on. And I would say my experience was that the energy and stuff was happening amongst the people you were around. It did not, when I first got there, it did not feel like there were going to be 300,000 people there. Even when I left, I couldn't tell how many people were there. I guess more and more were coming as the day went on. And so I don't know. It was like the stuff that was happening on stage was sort of happening while the experience of being there was going on. And
was there just one stage, like one place where people were speaking? Oh, okay.
And it was in the front, and we sort of made our way towards the front. There were actually people there that were sitting in chairs at the wayfront. And we got, sort of towards there, and that's where I mainly hung out. But there were like people I was with that were trying to find other people that they knew were there. And a lot of them never found them. Like I was with Rabbi Fox the whole day, and his parents were there, his in-laws were there. He never found them. But every 2 minutes he was being stopped by somebody, a former student of this or that. And I saw people I didn't expect to see, not the people I expected to see, besides us who sort of went together. Yeah, I don't know. It felt like something important happened, but I don't know where to put it. So,
It's so incredible what context means, because watching the Palestinian marches all around the world, I just felt horrible. I felt horrible looking at them. And watching this was so uplifting. And it's just funny to me.
I know why that matters so much. I guess what you see is that people matter the most. It's not the words. I know that, like, when they're streaming it, you're focused on the people that are speaking, but it wasn't my experience while I was there. I was not focused on the people that were speaking. It was like the people that were speaking were part of it, but they were like they almost were like background noise. There were a few times when they weren't, like when the mothers were talking of the hostages, that did not feel like background noise. And whenever they would start up the chant, "Bring them home," which I think if you could really control what was going on, you would have let those chants go a lot longer, because whenever they build up, something would interrupt them, like from the speaking, music would come on or something. There were a few singers that I think really broke through to the crowd, like Ishai Rebo, and especially he did Tehillim, like he did Shir Hamal. He has a song that's from Shir Hamal, and that to me was a sort of breakthrough moment. And then when Matisyahu came out, he just broke through. Like everybody knew the words. It was like I was looking around me, and it just really broke through to the crowd. And like the speakers, like the political speakers, I know that they're quoted, their stuff gets quoted afterwards. And it seems like that was, an important part of what was going on. It really, at least where I was and where I was walking around, that wasn't as much of what like broke through. The mothers talking, there was like silence when those mothers were talking, and then the singing parts, those really broke through. But I think it was just being around people, like you were, like just having the people there and feeling that you were with people. That was like something soulful. That was, to me, that was the thing that, that I'm sort of full of, was just being with people. The power of just being with people. I have my friend Harley Khan, who sort of got me to go, who I didn't see the whole time at all, even though he went from Midway, I went from O'Hare, and I never saw him the whole time. But he had said something before that, because he has a daughter who's she's fighting in Gaza. And he said, like, some Israeli friend of theirs just said, "Why don't you come over?" When it was first going on, he said, "Just come over. We're not going to talk. Just come over so we can be together." And to me, that was the thing, I guess, just people getting a chance to be together, and in a way that somehow meant something. I don't know.
I understand it to you that, it was the feeling of empathy and of shared emotions and to be with Am Yisrael. But from the whole, I know you didn't pay close attention to every speech, but was there anything like we wanted, revenge? Was that any of one of the motifs?
There were a couple guys, when we first were walking there were a couple guys who had T-shirts with the Hebrew word nekama, which means revenge. And they were like, even before anything started and you saw them walking, I mean, this is my own experience. When I saw them walking through, I felt like they were two lonely guys. It didn't feel like it captured anything of the feeling. There was I didn't feel anger. From all the people that I was around, anger was not present. I'm sure there were pockets of it in different places, but I was walking around the whole time and I did not experience any anger. I also didn't experience pity from amongst the people. Some of the speakers were sort of hanging on I am seen, language like I am seen, I am not invisible, you can't make us hide, or I don't know. They were saying things like that. That also did not reflect what was going on. It just felt like proud. It was serious. I mean, it was clearly there was a serious undertone, but I did not feel anger and I did not feel pity really from amongst the people, or not even vulnerability really. Also, there wasn't, I know I had read some stuff about the security at the place and the heightened security. You didn't have, again, obviously they had security tons of security on the perimeter, but it wasn't anything like you didn't see police. You saw police cars, but you didn't see like police standing. When you came into the place, there wasn't like a real like masculine sense of security going on. No bravado about security or anything. It was just like you went through security tents, they looked at your bags and you got in. And once you were there was no like visible police presence or, inside. And so there wasn't a feeling of vulnerability or anything. It was just, and certainly not anger. I didn't sense it. Maybe again, there could have been people in some pocket somewhere where they were next to people who were experiencing that, and I haven't heard it from other people since who were there since.
Watching it,
yeah.
whatever the media wanted to cover, they covered. But most of it, it looked like joy of the people being together.
That's what
it looked like.
What it felt like. It felt like just Jews being together. It was everybody's talking, everybody's meeting people that were from here or there, and just very happy to be there. And that's what it was. I think for me, that's what I witnessed. And I don't know why I had to be there. Like I didn't go because I felt like I had to be there. Well, maybe partly because it ended up that way, but I didn't feel like a strong surge that I had to be there, that somehow my participation was going to make some kind of difference. It just felt good to be there.
Yeah. What time did you get home, Rabbi?
So I actually got home at about 12.
Oh.
We could have even gotten home a little bit earlier, but the crew for the plane, they had a set time that they were already planning on going. And so because we got out earlier than we thought. There was even, they dropped us off at a mall for like an hour and a half
Oh,
just to hang out there. Before, and I guess like all I was with Rabbi Fox the whole time. We sat together, we schmoozed a lot together. But and there was this little group of us from Darchei Noam, or from my Gary Zitzman from our Daf Yomi class was there, and there were certain rabbis like Mariah has a new rabbi, Rachel Feingold, who is an Orthodox woman rabbi. Who so Mariah is making like a transformation, which I don't know if they fully figured out what it means. I don't think she's fully figured out what it means yet, but I happen to know her because I taught for a bunch of years. I taught a class at Anshe Shalom, and she was the education director for a while. So she was there. There was Karen Kadar from BJBE was there. Rabbi Schwab from Bethel. I know every rabbi was there probably, but they were on our planes, and so on our plane. So I got to. So there was like and that was another thing which was immediate right away, which was immediately apparent right away, is you are with Jews of every stripe. And it did not matter. That was another, I guess, beautiful thing about it. It just did not. There was no sense of who was.
were there groups of Hasidim, or
there were people there. They didn't come as a group. It wasn't like a representation of like Lubavitchers in one section or other types of Hasidim, by group. But they were definitely there. There was even a separate section for, like for men and women at one point, at some part of it, to accommodate the yeshivish and Hasidish people. But like there were Chabad, I would say Chabad were working. They were working it. They weren't there like just hanging out. They were working it. They were putting tefillin on people and handing out candles and doing that kind of thing. And the Hasidic groups, it looked like just groups of like 10 people here, that all knew each other, that must have just come together. But there was a visible from presence there, but it didn't feel like it was different. Even the shuls that were there, it wasn't like you were in a place where there's a bunch of little groups. You were in a place where there's just people. That's what it felt like. Because I know everybody took group pictures, to send back that their group was there, but it wasn't the experience when you were there that the USY faction was there and the NCSY faction was there or this or that. It was just people, which was very cool. And
yeah, thank you. Very, very early when I was watching it, there were students talking, and it looked like there were mostly students up front. But that was
because
early.
they had the early program they had the early program from like 11:30, and so they got there early, and that was remarkable too, because you had these kids getting up and talking about how they raised like $100,000, $150,000 different. I mean, these kids were remarkable. Right, but but when they were there, that's when we got there, like when they got there. That's why I was thinking, like, because when I was reading articles, the permit was for 60,000 people, and JTA had several articles where they made that clear. The permit's for 60,000. That's what they're expecting. And when we first got there, that's what I thought was going to happen, because it did not look like, and we got there maybe around noon, and it did not feel like there was going to be more than 50, 60,000. I wasn't sure how many were there even. Like, there were a couple of people with us that were looking for other people, so they were really trying to get through the crowd. And at some point they said that you couldn't move anymore. And so when I started to hear the number 300,000, I'm going, there's no way there were 300,000 people here. But then when I started hearing other people talking about how they were trying to move through the crowds, especially as you got farther back, and they said that you couldn't even walk through it anymore, then I realized that it just must be that a lot of people just continued to come. It never felt, even when we went through security in the beginning, and when we left, it did not feel like you're leaving a football game. It never felt that, or even a baseball game. You know how you get that congestion when you're trying to leave at a football game or a baseball game? I never felt that, like, real congestion. We were walking along the streets. There were a lot of people there, but it never felt like you have to stop because there's too many people. But I guess when you were with several people that were with us, and then we were talking about on the plane on the way back, they said that if you tried to walk through the crowd after a certain point, it was too dense. You couldn't walk through it. So yeah. And I don't know why it makes a difference if it was 300 or 60, but it does for some reason. It does make sense. 300 sounds like a number. Yeah. So I've been to a few. I've been to, in Israel, the only times I was ever with that many people were at funerals, and it was a weird feeling because even at those funerals there was an exhilaration when you saw how many people were there, a pride. Let's say Moshe Feinstein's funeral or something like that. There was also some kind of pride of a lot of people just being there to show somebody like that honor. That's why this one's harder to put there, because what was it? It was just, there's a lot of Jews who needed to get together.
Right. Speaking of that, obviously there aren't that many people, but I've heard that the funerals in Israel now, people will come, many people who didn't even know the person or the family come because they just want to be all together at funerals.
Yeah. And you could understand that need to, yeah. I was not at his funeral, but Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, I mean, the numbers were ridiculous for how many people they said were there. Yeah. Okay. There was a part of me also, I had to subdue it, but there was a part of me, because in the beginning, the speakers were not mentioning God. And it was like, after several speakers.
I also noticed that. I was so frustrated with that.
I know. After several speakers, I was like, I even turned to somebody and I go, can't wait. Hope the first person to mention God is not Pastor Hagee, because I just want there to be a Jew. But then Ishai Rebo, when he did the, his Shir Amalos, and that was like, and it went through the crowd. That was one of those breakthrough moments. Also, there was a point where everybody sang Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, and that was that went through the crowd. Even though, again, there's a lot of people there that are not religious, but it was palpable in the crowd, when everybody was singing that. And then you heard some people start to mention God. Somebody told me, I did not see this, but somebody told me Matisyahu said Shema Yisrael in the middle of when he was up there, that they actually covered his eyes and he said Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Which
also there's a guy that puts on tefillin with these superstar celebrities, and he posted on Twitter. He's like, not many people know this, but I asked him, and he said that he puts tefillin on every day.
Right.
Because you
Yeah,
think he's not
I
doing that.
really, he is such a complex figure. I really, and we're not going to get the depth of what was going on inside of him when he did it. But I can tell you that moment was electric. First of all, nobody knew he was coming. And then, well, I mean, somebody knew, but not the people that were out there. And then just to see everybody's reaction to it. And I wonder what that felt like for him, because I know he's probably had this experience of feeling on the outside the last couple of years, and certainly wasn't on the outside yesterday. Okay, let's check that out. Thank you, Mo. Also in our group, just as mostly from Mo, but in the group that went together, so Charlene and David Sales were the one who drove. They drove, like altogether we were 7 that actually drove together and drove back together. But it was Aviel, Tamara, Jamie Besser, the rabbi, and I, and the Sales. That was in the group, and we hung out together the whole time, basically.
Oh, nice. I saw the picture, you guys.
Yeah. And we talked about you, Mo, at some point.
I'm honored. Last night when we were closing up the restaurant, it was probably like 12 o'clock or 11:30, and we also like saw like probably like 100 buses of just like dropping people off, because mostly
makes
from New
sense.
York they took buses.
Because it took a while. You had to get to your bus, because the buses, our bus was like a mile and a half away. Where they would let the buses park. So you had to get to your bus, and then the traffic out of Washington. Apparently, it's just the nature of the traffic out of Washington. It was long. Yeah, so I would imagine that.
What did you guys do for food?
We were told to bring our own food. I brought sandwiches.
But did you see any restaurants set up shop there?
No, but I know they did. Some of them did, but we didn't, because we already had our own food, so we didn't go. But I saw some videos of some of the restaurants packed with people.
Right.
But we didn't even try to, because they had, like, in every email before we got there, they said, remember, there is no food. I was even telling Rabbi Fox, if this had been run by a Hamish Chevra, like a Hasidic group, so the airplane, there would have been like tons of food.
Steaks. Yeah.
On the airplane.
Yeah.
And there would have been like some kind of catered dinner before, like catered breakfast when we got there, catered dinner. Like they would have for sure been taken care of. I guarantee you, those ones who went on buses, like from New York,
Yeah,
they had that all taken care of. The Federation, there was, like, when you got on it was the closest I ever got to a private plane, because we didn't go through regular security or anything. We just went to the tarmac. It was just a little plane. It was a regular but smallish plane. It wasn't a fancy plane, but you're getting on, and you're just going on a few stairs, and then you go onto the plane. And at that, so they had some drinks, like Coke and water, and somebody went around with some baked goods from Shalom Bakery, like handing them out to people in the aisles. But otherwise, there was everybody just brought their own sandwiches.
Were there RVs, or you didn't see any RVs?
No, I mean, that was clear that they weren't letting
It was
anybody,
just buses kind of thing.
right? But even the buses were like, you had to walk like a mile and a half
Right.
just to get to the streets where you could see the buses.
Right. Wow.
I'm sure there were RVs. There were people that drove there, so I'm
Right.
sure RVs. But we didn't see any parking lots. You just saw the buses were coming on just on big streets. They were
Yeah.
just lined along the streets.
Right.
Um,
Nice.
Okay, so we were talking about lulav and why, for some reason, the Rambam points out that when it comes to the Daled meaning, the women are not obliged. He didn't say it about sitting in the sukkah, even though we saw in the Mishnah Torah he said that the women are not obliged when it comes to the sitting in the sukkah. But for some reason he doesn't say it in this work, and then he's going to do it again with the shofar. He should see one lishma kol shofar.
Could I ask?
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
prior to
Yeah.
that? I mean, this takes up where we were Monday, but exactly why are women not obligated? How come we don't use the same reasoning that we use on Hanukkah and on Purim? Why don't we say in that case, yes, it is a thing, but
right.
we do.
The other one I was wondering out loud with Mo was between Pesach and Sukkot, there is it's called a Gzera Shava. There's like a bridge, and there are certain laws that we learn from one to the other because the actual technical words for it are tesvav.
Yeah,
that the word is between. Right. So why don't they say that's part of the Gzera Shava? That just like women are obliged to eat matzah on the first night, which is not because they were in the same miracle. That it's learned out from another thing. It's learned out because the same people who are not allowed to eat chametz are chai to eat matzah, or obliged to eat the matzah. So why don't they apply that Gzera Shava? I know there's got to be somebody who talks about it, but I don't know right now, as of yet. I don't know why that doesn't get added into the Gzera Shava between them. You could say that the other things like the Daled Kosos, the women are obliged in the 4 cups, but that's a rabbinic edict. Hanukkah is a rabbinic edict. So you could say when the rabbis designed it, they included this feature, which is everybody's obliged. But for some reason, on the biblical level, that it doesn't appear. That reasoning doesn't appear on the biblical level. So at the biblical level, it's missing, even though you would expect it to be there. On the rabbinic level, they made sure to put it in. But I know it's just surprising. And again, he points this out here with the shofar blowing. And it is that he commanded us to listen to the sound of the shofar on the first day of the shofar. And that is his may be exalted saying, it shall be a day of blowing for you. This is the quote from, it's Yom Trua is the quote, right? Yom Trua, a day of blowing. And the laws of the commandment have already been explained in Tractate Rosh Hashanah. It's sort of interesting that the mitzvah is to listen, lishmoa kol shofar, to listen to the sound of the shofar. The verse he's quoting, which is in Parshas Pinchas, where it's talking about the holidays, mostly focused on the offerings, but it does add this notion, it's a Yom Trua. That sounds like it's a mitzvah to blow a shofar, not to listen to the sound, but to blow a shofar. That subtle difference is it has ramifications. The mitzvah is to hear the sound of the shofar, not to blow a shofar, to make it sound. So
when the guy makes the bracha before, is it
lishma
that
kol
you
shofar? He actually says it. I think the bracha is lishma kol shofar.
and not he doesn't say the blowing also?
No, I don't think so.
Right.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't.
Right, because one is just a shachianu.
Right, it's just lishma kol shofar. There, and there's halachic ramifications, making sure that you're actually hearing the sound of the shofar, not an echo of the shofar, and not other things. But one interesting ramification is that the law is that you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah or daled minim, of the four species or sukkah, with a stolen sukkah or a stolen lulav and esrog. Now, there's the brazen stealing of something, but you could also accidentally have stolen it. In other words, you could have, let's say, paid with a check, and then your check bounced, or whatever, you took it and you were planning on paying the guy, but you forgot to pay the guy. You could have scenarios like that, or you got it from somebody else and you didn't realize that person had it without permission. You could have scenarios where you're using a stolen sukkah or a stolen daled minim and not realize it, that it was stolen. So the halacha is you cannot fulfill the mitzvah with something that is stolen. I don't think this is in the Bavli. I think it's in the Yerushalmi. It mentions this, that is different with a shofar. Even if it was a stolen shofar, you can fulfill the mitzvah, because the mitzvah is not about the blowing of the shofar. The mitzvah is about hearing the sound of a shofar. And it says you cannot steal sound. You cannot steal sound. So it actually makes that point. And it opened up, I was once teaching a Talmud class at a conservative high school in Highland Park. They asked me to come if I would teach a Talmud class there, and when I got there, I go, now that you see me, do you think that you still want me to do it? And they sort of chuckled, and I said, yes, we knew who you were before. But and it was sort of it actually ended up being an incredible group of kids. It was really something. But my first class with those kids, and where I won them over, because when I got there, it was like, I don't know, there's maybe 20 kids, and they're not expecting to be interested in this. And so it was before Rosh Hashanah, and we're doing Gemara, so I presented this conundrum. Why is it that you can't do the mitzvah with the four species, and we did a Gemara from there, if they're stolen, but you can fulfill the mitzvah with the shofar if it was stolen? Again, they're not expecting to care about this at all. And then we got onto the subject of this notion of owning sound or stealing sound. And then I asked them, like, if you live across from Ravinia in Highland Park, and you record the Bee Gees or whoever's playing that night, can you sell the music? No, you can't sell it. It's copyrighted, can't use it. So that means that a local jurisdiction holds that it is stealing to take somebody else's sound and then resell it. And then we got to talk about the difference between what if you have a Torah rule, but you have a contradictory local rule, what we call dina de malchusa dina. The law of the land is the law. So who would win in this case? Would the local jurisdiction win, and then you can't steal it? Or you, as a Torah observant person, would say, well, according to the Torah and its interpretation through the Gemara, you can't own sound. And so we got into this discussion about Dina Dina, and then that's when I asked them, now, if you all think that it makes perfect sense, it's intuitive, and you're actually proud of the fact that even according to Jewish law, we have to respect local law, jurisdiction, Dina Dina, and they were all confident about it and said yes. And I said, well, then can you, with consistency, celebrate the 4th of July? Because on the 4th of July, we're celebrating a revolution against the British monarchy. We broke the law of the land. We went against the law of the land. And so if you hold Dina de Dina, that the law of the land is the law. And at this point, the guys who were, these guys, like I saw heads lift off the table, and suddenly everybody was like going at it and all, etc. And I had those guys for the rest of the time. That was a beautiful moment, and it all started with a stolen shofar and this thing that the mitzvah is the sound, and this notion that at least is developed in the Yerushalmi that you can't own sound. A person can't own sound, and therefore you can't be accused of stealing sound, even though the object that you're using is stolen, but the sound that emerges is not considered tainted. It's not considered stolen, and therefore you could still fulfill the mitzvah with it. Okay, just a little thought there.
Yeah.
I'm
Rabbi,
grateful.
I'm sorry, is there, let's say you're using a stolen sukkah or, a stolen lulav, but you have no idea. Is there a vidui that, that you can be forgiven for that?
Well, you didn't fulfill a positive mitzvah. That's the problem.
Like
you just
tefillin
yes.
also. Is tefillin the same
Right.
thing?
I think so. Typically, the rule is that that you cannot fulfill a mitzvah with if it's a stolen object, and so you would have not fulfilled a positive commandment. And there is a vidu. Yeah, it's part of the al-chetz.
But I mean, like,
not
not even if it's stolen, but if it's just not even kosher and you didn't know. Like, let's
right.
say
So
it's
you
blood or
didn't,
something.
at the very base of it, you didn't fulfill the positive commandment. You didn't fulfill it, even with being well-meaning. You didn't fulfill it. There's a whole nother subject of when you're trying to do something, Hashem considers it as if you did it, which you have to sort of work out with this. But technically, you did not fulfill the mitzvah, and therefore, if you have another chance, you have to go out of your way to use the other chance. And if you didn't, then you are in the ballpark of other people that didn't fulfill that positive commandment. We could talk about this more. We'll talk about it on Monday. I look forward to doing that with you guys. All right. And our learning was in the merit of the speedy and safe return of the hostages, of the healing for those who are wounded, of the comfort for the bereaved, of the protection for the soldiers, the protection for everybody in Israel, and the protection of all of us, and in the Mashiach Tzidkenu come b'meher b'yameinu. All right, be well, guys. I love you. And Mo, I'm thinking of you.
Thanks. I love you.
All right, be well, Beverly. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Love you back.
All right, bye-bye.